Hello, I'm Brigham Avery, and welcome to Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark. The show where we get to know celebrity Cub fans from the entertainment world as we take you from Wrigley Field to the red carpet. The following episode of Hollywood and Ivy was filmed live on location at 1050 North Waveland Avenue in the shadow of the friendly confines. And welcome to a very special episode of Hollywood and Ivy. We are literally rocking the Wrigley rooftops, and today we have an amazing guest. The great Kerry is here. Welcome to Hollywood and Ivy. Thank you for being here.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here on the show, and I'm looking forward to it.
My pleasure. Kerry, you got drafted by the Cubs in 1995. You were 18 years old. You come to Chicago for the first time.
Yeah, it was a kind of a whirlwind. It was crazy. Literally was 17 years old still when I got drafted, and then by the time I signed my contract, finished my senior year in high school, I turned 18 and became a Cub. So coming here to Chicago was my first time in a taxi, first time in a cab.
Really? Get
to O'Hare and hop in the cab and head downtown, and it was just holding on for dear life and white knuckle ride all the way there. So I remember saying actually to my parents, "There's no way I could live here. There's no way I could live in the city. Right? I can't do this." It was a little overwhelming for me. So then you get to Wrigley Field, you walk in, and they took me down to the clubhouse, got to meet some of the guys, and freshly 18-year-old kid, just mind blown and overwhelmed, and then coming out of the dugout steps and getting to see Wrigley Field was just, it takes your breath away.
What was your first thought and feeling when you saw Wrigley Field?
This is different than any feeling I've ever had looking at a baseball field, looking at a baseball diamond. I've been to big league games before as a kid, and I was a Texas Rangers fan growing up. Never experienced anything like it. It was just another level of perfection for me, for the sport.
Kerry, as a kid, you recently told me that you grew up a Rangers fan outside of Dallas, but that in essence, you watched another team growing up.
Yeah, Texas kid growing up outside of Dallas. So I was a Texas Rangers fan. Didn't know a whole lot about the National League other than the Cubs. I came home from school just like most of us did, and around the country at the time when WGN was broadcasting all the games. So I got to see the Cubs, and usually watch the last 4 or 5 innings or 3 or 4 innings of the game when I got home from school. So that was kind of my introduction to the National League Baseball and into the Cubs. And it was just something I'd turn on TV, watch the game, learn a little bit about the game, and didn't know much about it, but I knew the Cardinals were a rival at the time. Even when I was a kid, I knew that the Cubs fans didn't like the Cardinals. But I also knew they were the lovable losers. It was a logo and label that I even remember hearing as a kid. So it was kind of all I kind of knew about National League Baseball and the Cubs at the time, but I did watch them daily.
You came to Chicago in 1995. There is footage, Kerry, of you, and I talked about this with you yesterday. We spoke and told you about you coming up to the broadcast booth with Harry and Steve, and you walking in, and Harry and Steve looking at you, "Look at this big man from Texas," and it looked like you were going to kick them out of a honky-tonk. And look at you guys have been here too long, you know what I mean? But that was amazing. What was it like walking in there the first time and meeting those guys live on television that way?
Again, just like 18-year-old kid, what am I doing here? What is happening? Kind of an experience and kind of a moment. And then you walk into this booth, and it's got, it's the most beautiful view you could have at Wrigley Field. You're in the press box, you're right there, and it's just, you're just trying to take it all in, and then you introduced to Steve Stone, you're like, "Oh my gosh, his voice sounds just like it does on TV," and then you turn and there's Harry Carey, and now I'm shaking Harry Carey's hand, and it was just a surreal moment and just overwhelming, like I said, for anyone, but a young kid that just got drafted by this team. So it was a special moment. My parents enjoyed it. We'll never forget it. My dad still talks about it. I got to meet Harry Carey, and so just special, not just for me, but for the entire family.
Let's talk about May 6th, 1998. That was, and we'll talk about this further, that was, in my opinion, the greatest pitching performance of all time. That was your 5th start ever. Yep. You struck out 20 Houston Astros. It could have been a no-hitter. And I feel as though if you look at the measurables, the defined measurables, the truths in baseball, all those things lead to that, because that ball that was hit by Ricky Gutierrez off Kevin Orr's glove, a lot of amazing things. But just talk about that day and your thoughts and everything.
Yeah, for you to say it's one of the greatest, it certainly was my best pitching performance, so I can say that, but the best of all time is mind-blowing to me. So I'll just leave it. It was my best start of my career by far. But it was, again, just I was young. I was 20 years old. I was my 5th start. I was still trying to get used to day games. I'd been in the minor leagues and we'd played mostly night games, so I'm trying to get used to all this day game stuff at Wrigley Field. And 20-year-olds, I got a 17-year-old, almost 18-year-old now. They don't, and looking at him, he doesn't move fast in the morning, and it's hard to get these guys up. And I was in the same boat. So just trying to wake up and get to the field on time and make sure my body was ready to go on game day. So, that particular day, it was just, we had lost a few games in a row. Didn't know much about Houston. It was my 5th start. I knew that they had a good lineup, but I knew that it was my job. I felt like it was my job to stop the losing streak and get us back on track and try and go out and give us a chance to win the game. So that was my mindset going into it.
And that speaks volumes about you as a pitcher, because that's what your number one starter is supposed to be. They're supposed to stop a losing streak. They're supposed to be the momentum changer. So that's a great mentality to have. Talk about the rest of that season, 1998, because I feel as though usually when there's a magical season, a team wins a division, a World Series, there's one game that lays the foundation, sets the tone. Is that the truth?
I mean, I've never really looked at it that way. I think when you say it that way, it kind of makes sense just because of how early in the year it was. There were zero expectations on this team. I had just got called up. My first 4 starts were kind of all over the place. Showing some good signs, showing some signs of youth, and some control stuff. And then that 5th start happens, and it was like, holy cow! Like this, if we can get, half the time, if we can get this out of this kid, we got a chance with this team. We still have Sammy. We have, Morandini up there. We had a good team. We got Gracie. We got guys that can play. We got Steve Traxler. We've got some arms. We got guys that know how to pitch. We got Kevin Tapani, and Henry Rodriguez. We had some thump in the lineup, and we had enough arms. And so you start feeling it. You start thinking about it. You start loving it. The fans start buying into it, and then Sammy starts hitting home runs left and right, and then we buy into it as a group, as a team, and it was a fun season. But I think, for me, I don't look at my stuff that year. I look at what Sammy was able to do and the fun that those guys put all the baseball fans through that season.
You followed that up. Your sophomore performance after the 20 strikeout was 13 against Arizona. That's 33 strikeouts in 2 games. That's pretty impressive. So you carried that momentum over. Not a lot of people talk about that. Talk about the second start after it.
Just trying to piggyback off the last start. Young enough to think, hey, I can do that again, and dumb enough to think I can do that again, because I felt strong and I felt like my last time out was pretty easy. I didn't have to think about it. I just went after these guys and was able to do what I did. So kind of went into that game thinking the same thing. I think this team's not as good as the last team, so if I do what I do, I should be able to get a bunch of strikeouts and we should win another game. So I do remember we won the game. I do remember walking off after the 7th inning and getting taken out of the game and thinking to myself, like, I was disappointed that I didn't have more. I think I gave up a homer, I gave up a run or two, but we were still winning the game. But I was like, I could have had more.
Right.
So that was my mindset going out there, after that 20 strikeout game for the next several starts. I was like, I feel like I should be able to do this again.
You were a teammate of a gentleman that had been there for 10 years. I'm talking about Mark Grace.
A lot of the off the field advice was great from Mr. Grace, but for me coming in and being a young player, and he was like the center heartbeat veteran guy of our club, right?
He was 35 at the time.
I mean, he was heart and soul of the Cubs.
Yeah.
This was like the next after Ernie. This guy was the
Mr. Cub.
The new Mr. Cub, and so I looked at him as that. He was the leader of the team. He had all the advice. He'd been through it. He knew everyone in the stadium. He knew everyone around town when he went. So if you went anywhere with him, he knew everybody. So for me, he was like mayor of Chicago. Mark Grace was it. What he said goes. And he just had a way of not taking the game too seriously, but also, making sure guys felt comfortable, and especially me as a young player. So I think he played a pivotal role in me, coming up and being able to handle the pressures of a big league life. And then the pressures even get bigger after you do what I did in my 5th start. And so he was able to kind of help me keep that stuff in check.
Talk about game 163 in 1998, the one-game playoff against the Giants. That was a very significant victory.
It was, and I think even more so for the future of the organization. Traxel came out, and he had a no-hitter going into the 7th or 6th or 7th inning, so he was just completely locked in. No one expected us to get into the postseason that year. So I think that year, for us to sneak in and do that, I think that year changed kind of the expectation started to change the expectation of the Cubs fan.
Turning the tide.
Starting to do it. And then I think later in 2003, I think that 2003 year set it in stone, where I think the Cubs fans expect to be in the postseason.
What we're talking about, Kerry, is a culture of winning. That planted the seeds to a culture of winning.
So I think that 98 season, I think that playoff win, that 163 against the Giants, Traxel doing what he did in that game, I think that started to change the tide for the Cubs fan. It was just a magical season. We had all kind of the team, and the way that who the players were and how it all kind of pieced together, and and then what we were able to kind of pull off.
And welcome back to Hollywood and Ivy. Today we're live from the Wrigley rooftops and visiting with Kerry Wood. And Kerry, you have another guest. The executive producer of the show is with us. Mr. Joe Mantegna is here. Joe, welcome.
Yeah.
Look at Joe. Joe, you don't age a bit, man. Look at you. Look great.
Well, hanging in there for an old guy.
You
know
look
what I mean?
amazing.
Yeah. Well, when you're a Cub fan, you have to have perseverance. You have to like hang in there, and you know.
Yes.
And so it's all good.
That's
We've got the World Series hat right there.
I love
So
it.
Yeah,
you see,
look at that.
there
I
we
love
go.
it.
Wow. So, Joe, you threw out the first pitch May 6th, 1998. Talk about that day. It was kind of just happenstance. It just kind of came together. You weren't expecting anything, but isn't that usually the table setting for baseball
Yeah.
miracles?
For me, it was a perfect, in a way, Cubs story in a sense. Because while we were there, the Cubs contacted me and said, "Hey, you know that we've got a day game. If you're free on Thursday afternoon against the Astros, if you want to throw out the first pitches that I'd done a few times prior to that." I said, I think that'll be great, and I could bring the cast, the bleacher bums. That'll be terrific. And so we all go down. There was a drizzly kind of cool day, and it was a Thursday, and they were telling me some young kid's going to be pitching. Should be interesting. Said, yeah, okay, it all sounds good. I invited my brother, and we all went. Little did we know it would become one of the most historical days in Cub history. Certainly, a historical day for all of us Cub fans. So just to be part of it, it was what happened later. Is when I had this signature put on it,
Do you recognize that, Kerry?
That's so
Love
good.
it.
on that day, boy, this thing went in my pocket right away. And I thought to myself, there might be somebody here from Cooperstown that might try to mug me. I called the 7th and 8th inning up in the booth with Santo and the boys up there. And I know they sent a CD out that year to all the season ticket holders. And if you listen on the CD, you hear me going nuts up in the booth saying, "Hey, I was got a 17. Oh my God, 18." You know what I mean? It was just, what a thrill.
Yes,
Just what a
I've heard that, and it's amazing. I've heard that recording. I've heard you up in the booth with those guys, and it really is. It's amazing to feel. You can feel the energy through the sound waves. It was pretty cool experience for me personally as well.
Bottom line, let's put it this way. It's one of the greatest pitching performances ever done in the history of baseball. It forever will be. And what's part of it, what's great is the fact who did it. I mean, Kerry, you did it. It's such a, at that point in your career. And so you, Kerry, were the perfect, you exemplified that fantasy that we all have as fans, as kids. You were that guy. You were that in every respect. And you still back it up today, because especially stuff you've done outside of baseball, your charitable work, all of it. You're a perfect example. That's why I'm so proud to have this ball, and mainly because it was you that threw it.
Well, Joe, to hear you just explain it that way, and just that to give you give us that perspective of what a lifelong Cub fan feels like, and talking about that experience and talking about that game is just. It's an honor to me. An honor to me that you still have the ball, and that is something you've kept on your shelf and a memory that you have. And I think what's so surprising, I think, for fans at the time and when that happened was, there were at the time there was only one other guy that had done it, and it was Roger Clemens, and everyone knew Roger Clemens. And if you look back on now there's 4 of us that have done it. It's Max Scherzer, Randy Johnson, and Roger did it twice. It wasn't really a surprise that those 3 other guys, everybody kind of knew Max Scherzer was a strikeout pitcher, and they knew his record and who he was and everybody knew Randy Johnson was a power, nasty lefty that could strike a ton of guys out, and it could happen at any time. Roger Clemens, 5-time Cy Young ringer, 3,000 plus strikeouts. And for me to be a 20-year-old kid to come out of nowhere on a rainy nothing game in the middle of, early part of May, and I think that part of the lore, I think it adds to some of the lore of that season and being a Cub fan and what it means to be dedicated, to be there, in May, early May in a 49-degree game where it's kind of spit and rain the whole time, and just not baseball weather, but Chicago baseball weather.
I'll add one little anecdote to that. One of the other times I threw out the first pitch, same thing. I'm going out. I'm going to throw out the first pitch. I don't know who's catching the ball. He catches it. He runs out to me and he goes, "Oh, would you like me to sign the ball?" And of course, you're going to say yes. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, great. You signed the ball. This guy's going to be in Iowa in a couple of weeks. All right, fine. He signs the ball. I stick it in my pocket. I was even thinking of giving it to some kid on the way out. And it wasn't until I think some years later, as because I kept a lot of some of those balls, and I look at it. It was Joe Girardi who caught the ball.
Yeah, it's not
You know,
always the four-string catcher. Sometimes it's they've asked to be there because they're a fan of yours.
yeah, sometimes it's the guy who's ultimately
Right.
going to be, struck out 20 guys in a blustery day in May. So there
Right.
you go.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you both. This is the essence of the show right now: sports and entertainment intersecting and talking about the great memories that make baseball wonderful, the great memories that make entertainment wonderful. So thank you so much, Joe, for being here. Let's see that ball one more time. Flash it up there. Joe Monte, executive producer. There it
You're
is. Very
hard
nice.
out, Cooperstown.
And we'll be back with more on Hollywood and Ivy after this. And we're back on Hollywood and Ivy, live from the Wrigley rooftops.
Yeah.
One thing I'm noticing that I want you to talk about, Kerry, is the bullpens and where they used to be.
Yeah.
So right there, they're not there anymore. Talk about where they used to be and how unique that was,
Yeah,
because
so-
you're live in the game.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest differences looking at the stadium now is how lucky the guys in the bullpen are.
Right. They have to look
They get
live
to-
every pitch, right?
They don't have to pay attention to foul balls. They don't have to hear the fans yelling at them when they're not throwing well, and they can actually sit inside and be in the heated, nice little comfy bullpen that's underneath the bleachers. So we would set, right off the foul line with the the April and May 30-mile-an-hour winds blowing in at you
Yep.
off the lake and freeze for 5 or 6 innings before you get called to go in the game. So that's the biggest change I see here now.
If we were to come to a game too, another change would be we'd see the pitching clock counting down from 20.
Yep.
How unique is that, and how specific do you think that changes the game?
I think of all the changes and all the rules they've made over the last several years, I think for that one it seems to have done a really good job of speeding the games up. I think
Yeah.
fans appreciate it. I think players appreciate it. I'm sure beer sales don't appreciate it as much, but
Right, very true.
the 3 hour game time seems to be liked by most. So I don't think it bothers most guys. I think everybody's used to it by now. There's some other changes that I think still kind of, I don't know if I know all the rules on them yet, but they still kind of irk me a little bit. Some of the pitching changes and the trips to the mound and some of the nuances of the game that I used to play that are gone
A little
now.
too much detail for you, maybe, perhaps?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think especially going in late into the games, I think with the mound visits, and I think I played in an era where there was left-handed specialists. Those guys are gone now. You have to face 3 hitters.
Yeah.
You can't just come in for one guy in the 8th inning and get
Right,
the,
yeah,
get the
that
big
used to be a
lefty out.
specialty.
Kind of was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like-
Where would your kids and your family sit when they watch you pitch? Where was that seat, Kerry? And
So yeah, I mean, I think they were section 121. I think was the family section. So I knew general direction. I'd always see them usually on the day I'd go to start. If I went out to the field, I'd do my warm-up pitches, and then as they're throwing the ball around, I would look in their section, find where they were, and that way, so I could. I gave a little sign to them before I started every game. I would grab my chest and give like a little pat here, and then I'd face the first hitter, and then I'd give the kids a glove, like a little glove flap when I came out of the game when I knew I was done. So.
talk about the contrast of night and your opinions on night baseball at this beautiful stadium.
Yeah, I mean, so for me being an outsider, I didn't really have an opinion on the lights until I became a player here, and then the longer I played here, I think I started to appreciate it more. Lights were here, obviously, when I
Yes,
came in. They were
yeah.
already here.
They've been there for 10 years.
But yes, for 10 years.
Yeah.
But we hadn't implemented a ton of night games.
Right,
we
right,
were
right.
still fighting for more night games, neighborhood ordinances, and all of that stuff. So we were fighting for more night games all the time.
Right.
Because us as players, we as players liked night games better. I don't know, just felt like there was a different energy when you get. You get Wrigleyville in the nighttime with the lights on, and the energy just feels different.
The
And I
verb
think
you used was electric. There's
there's
electricity.
an electricity to it. It's palpable. You can feel it. So I had multiple conversations over the years with some guys on the team about the day game, night game issue, and it seemed like we kind of all felt that we were at a disadvantage playing so many day games in the heat of the summer versus the other teams in the league that were trying to go out and compete and win a
Right.
pennant against to get the not be in the heat of summer for
Yes.
the most of their games. So that was our argument as players, and so we constantly fought for more night games, and I think the more night games we got as an organization, it seemed like the more consistent we got on the field, and so I just felt we played better at night. I felt like it got us out of the sun. We were able to be stronger down the stretch, and into August and all of September when those games were really important.
And finally, Kerry, I was going to mention this as it was going by. We just saw the L pass by in
Yeah.
the background of you. Talk about that. You actually took the L
I did.
to Wrigley Field on an occasion.
Yep, one time early in my rookie year, I was like, oh, I can take the train right to right field and get off. Didn't really realize the whole Cub thing.
Did people recognize you?
Somebody recognized me, and so that first time I rode the train was also my last time I rode the train to Wrigley Field.
Right.
But I did it. It was an experience, and I can say I did it.
So, Kerry, talk about 2003. Talk about the uniqueness of that staff. Very eclectic, very talented group of ball players. Matt Clement, everyone called him Abe because he had the goatee. Remember that? They wore those at Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
Then you had Carlos Zambrano, Big Z. Mark Pryor, who should have won the Cy Young that year, 18-6, 2.86 ERA in 2003. And, of course, Kerry Wood. You throw in the great performance against Atlanta in the playoffs, but the eclectic staff coming together in 2003. Talk about that uniqueness.
Yeah, I think it was just, you look at me and Pryor at the time, we were fairly similar. I think he was much more polished coming into the league than I was at the time. Even at that age, I'd already had 4 or 5 years in, and I just thought he was so good and so polished and so clean when he came up, and what he was able to do with the baseball. We were four-seam fastball guys, slider, breaking ball, a little bit of changeup. So he had similar stuff. I think he had better command. And then you get Clement and Zambrano. You throw those guys in the mix. Super heavy sinkers, both of them. Balls move all over the place. They're throwing sliders, and Z's throwing splits. And I don't even, at that time, I don't think Z knew where any of his pitches were going. But he had three. They moved all over the place. And when he could kind of get them dialed in, he was about as unhittable as anybody. So we really got into the rhythm where we fed off each other, and then I don't want to exclude
Sean Estes, number 55,
our number 55, our reliable lefty who ate a ton of innings for us and pitched some really big games for us as well. So we meshed together as a group well on and off the field. So getting to do that with those group of pitchers that year was special.
Do you stay in contact with Mark Pryor, who's now the pitching coach of the Dodgers, very successful? And is that anything you would like to do later in life? Any desire to be a pitching coach on the major league level? No,
I don't. Mark's really good at it, and I think he can elevate. He could do anything in baseball. He could go to GM. He could be a pitching coach. He can do anything he wants to do. He's a smart guy, and he loves the game, and guys respect him, and he's really good at his job. So I've always said coaches get fired. I don't want to be floating around chasing that again. But he's been there for a while, and he's really good at it. So I'm happy for him. But yeah, I keep in contact with him quite a bit. Clement, Zambrano as well.
Well, Kerry, as you notice, I'm wearing something. This is actually a shirt that we made on Hollywood and Ivy.
I love it.
This is the 25th anniversary of the greatest performance ever, 20 strikeouts. So we have these right here, and I've actually I've got one for you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So please hold that up.
Thank you.
So this shirt, Kerry, it was designed by our good friends at Clark Street Sports, our good buddy Jason. It's a special shirt made for the 25th anniversary of the greatest pitching performance of all time. And we also have something else. We don't have a guest book on Hollywood and Ivy, Kerry.
Okay.
However, we do have a guest ball, and I'd like to,
right.
let's see. Oh, boy.
Excellent.
And I'm going to throw this to you.
All right.
And Kerry, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you
Hollywood
for
and
having
Ivy. It's been great. We've been live at the Wrigley rooftops. Once again, for Kerry Wood, I'm Brigham Avery. Thank you so much for watching Hollywood and Ivy, and tune in next time on the Marquee Sports Network. Today's episode of Hollywood and Ivy was filmed live on location at 1050 North Waveland Avenue at the Wrigley rooftops in the shadow of the friendly confines. Set design provided by Clark Street Sports. For the best Cubs gear, go to clarkstreetsports.com. Catering for Hollywood and Ivy provided by Do Right Donuts and Chicken, located at 1027 West Addison in Chicago. Hollywood and Ivy is a presentation of Brigham Avery Productions.